The wagon rattled to a stop in front of the saloon, and Katherine Pierce felt the rope burn against her wrists as rough hands yanked her down onto the dusty street of Ukiah, California. Her mother-in-law's voice still echoed in her ears from that morning, cold and final. Barren women have no place in our family, and since my son is too weak to cast you out, I will solve this problem myself. It was the summer of 1876, and Catherine had been married to Thomas for 3 years without producing an heir. His mother, Martha, had grown more vicious with each passing month, whispering poison into her son's ear until he stopped meeting Catherine's eyes altogether. When Martha's brother arrived at their homestead outside Sacramento with his business proposition, Thomas had simply nodded and walked away while Catherine screamed his name. Now she stood in the center of Ukiah's main street, her dark hair tangled and her calico dress torn at the shoulder, while Martha's brother Edmund haggled with a crowd of men who had gathered at the promise of acquiring a wife without the trouble of courtship. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and Catherine's throat was parched, but she held her chin high even as tears threatened to spill down her cheeks. She is healthy and young, only 22 years old, Edmund announced, his voice carrying across the dusty thoroughfare. Can cook, clean, sew, and manage a household. The only defect is that she cannot bear children, so the price is reduced accordingly. Catherine's stomach turned at being discussed like livestock. She scanned the faces of the men circling closer, seeing varying degrees of interest, suspicion, and something darker that made her skin crawl. An older man with tobacco-stained teeth stepped forward, reaching out to grab her chin, and she jerked her head away. "Feisty one," he muttered. "I already got 6 young ones who need tending. Don't need more mouths to feed anyway." "$50," another man called out, and Edmund's eyes lit up with greed. "60," countered the first man. Catherine's vision blurred as panic seized her chest. This could not be happening. She had been a school teacher before marrying Thomas, the daughter of respectable shopkeepers who had died in a fire when she was 19. She had married for love, or so she thought, only to discover that love meant nothing when measured against the value of children she could not provide. $100. The new voice cut through the commotion like a knife, deep and steady. The crowd parted, and Catherine saw him for the first time. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He could not have been much older than 30, with striking hazel eyes that met hers directly, and something in that gaze made her breath catch. Unlike the other men, he was not looking at her with assessment or ownership, but with something that might have been understanding or perhaps anger on her behalf. He wore the practical clothing of a working rancher, dusty boots and worn denim, with a gun belt slung low on his hips. There was an easy confidence in the way he stood, as though he was accustomed to being listened to and obeyed. Edmund practically salivated at the offer. $100. Now that is a serious bid, mister. Austin Miller, the man said, his eyes never leaving Catherine's face. And I want to speak with the lady alone before any money changes hands. Edmund sputtered. Now see here, this is an auction, not a social call. You are selling a human being in the middle of the street like a horse, Austin said, his voice taking on a hard edge. The least you can do is grant her the dignity of a conversation. Unless you would prefer I report this entire transaction to the sheriff as human trafficking? The crowd shifted uneasily. Edmund's face reddened, but he jerked his head toward the nearby general store. 5 minutes, and she stays tied. Austin stepped forward and in one smooth motion pulled a knife from his belt and cut the ropes binding Catherine's wrists. She gasped as blood rushed back into her hands. The rope burns, stinging fiercely. She is not a criminal, Austin said flatly, helping Catherine steady herself as she rubbed feeling back into her arms. Come on, miss, let us talk. He guided her toward the shaded porch of the general store, his hand hovering near her elbow without actually touching her. Catherine's mind raced. Who was this man? Why was he helping her? And what did he want in return? Once they were out of immediate earshot, Austin turned to face her, and his expression had softened slightly. My name is Austin Miller. I own a cattle ranch about 5 miles outside of town. I am not going to hurt you, and I am not going to force you into anything, but I need you to listen carefully because we do not have much time. Catherine nodded, her voice trapped in her throat. That man Edmund is going to sell you to someone today, whether it is me or one of those vultures back there. I saw what was happening when I rode into town for supplies, and I will be damned if I stand by and watch a woman be traded like property. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I am willing to pay the money to get you out of this situation. In return, I would ask that you come work for me as a housekeeper. I lost my last one 6 months ago when she moved back east, and the ranch house is falling into chaos. I can offer you fair wages, your own room, and I give you my word as a gentleman that I will never lay a hand on you without your permission. Catherine stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You want to pay $100 for a housekeeper? I want to pay $100 to keep you from being sold to a man who will treat you as less than human, Austin corrected gently. The housekeeping is simply what we will tell everyone else, including Edmund. As far as the law is concerned, he is selling you as a mail-order bride, which, while morally reprehensible, is not technically illegal if you do not contest it. But once we are away from here, you are free to make your own choices. If you want to leave, go somewhere else, start over, I will help you do that. If you want to stay and work for wages, that option is open too. Why would you do this? Catherine whispered, searching his face for deception. You do not even know me. Austin's jaw tightened. I know what it is like to be powerless. I know what it is like to be treated as worthless because of something you cannot control. And I know that I have the means to help you right now. So that is what I am going to do. You do not owe me anything beyond honest work if you choose to stay. Do we have an agreement? Catherine's knees felt weak. For the first time since Martha had announced her plan that morning, she felt a flicker of hope. This stranger was offering her freedom when freedom seemed impossible. It could be a trap, some elaborate cruelty, but the alternative was being sold to men whose intentions were transparent in their leering stares. Yes, she said, her voice stronger now. We have an agreement, Mr. Miller. Austin, he said, and something that might have been the ghost of a smile touched his lips. If we are going to be telling people we are married, you should probably use my given name. Before Catherine could respond, he was already turning back toward the crowd, his posture shifting into something more authoritative. She followed, her heart pounding. Austin pulled a leather wallet from his pocket and counted out bills with deliberate slowness, letting everyone see the transaction. $100 as offered. I am taking the lady as my wife, and I expect this matter to be considered settled. Edmund, I assume you have some kind of paper that transfers whatever imaginary ownership you think you have? Edmund produced a hastily scrawled document that made Catherine's stomach turn. It described her as goods being transferred from one party to another. Austin signed it without reading, then immediately tore the paper in half. There, it is done. And if anyone from Sacramento comes looking to cause trouble for Catherine, they will have to go through me. Are we clear? The crowd murmured, but no one challenged him. Edmund pocketed the money and climbed back onto his wagon, clearly eager to leave before Austin changed his mind. The other men dispersed, disappointed but unwilling to argue with someone who carried himself like Austin Miller did. Catherine felt Austin's hand, gentle this time, on her elbow. I have a wagon just down the street. Let us get you out of here. She allowed herself to be led away from the scene of her humiliation, her legs moving automatically while her mind struggled to process everything that had happened. Within the space of an hour, she had been sold like property and then rescued by a stranger. It felt surreal, like something from one of the dime novels her students used to hide under their primers. Austin's wagon was well maintained, hitched to 2 sturdy horses. He helped her up onto the bench seat with a courtesy that felt foreign after the rough treatment she had endured. Once he had climbed up beside her and taken the reins, they began the journey out of town. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable exactly, but heavy with unspoken questions. Catherine watched the buildings of Ukiah give way to open grassland, dotted with oak trees and grazing cattle in the distance. The landscape was beautiful in its golden, sun-scorched way, so different from the greener pastures around Sacramento. "You said you lost your housekeeper 6 months ago," Catherine finally said, needing to break the silence. "How have you been managing?" Austin kept his eyes on the road. "Poorly. I am a fair hand with cattle and horses, but cooking and cleaning have never been my strengths. I have been surviving on burned stew and living in what can only be described as a disaster. My foreman, Luis, keeps threatening to quit if I do not hire someone soon." Despite everything, Catherine felt a small smile tug at her lips. "I suppose I arrived at an opportune moment then. For both of us, I think." Austin glanced at her, his expression serious again. "Catherine, I meant what I said back there. You are not obligated to stay. I know you have been through hell today, and you do not know me from Adam. If you want, I can take you to the next town over, give you enough money to start fresh somewhere else. No one would blame you." Catherine considered this. She had no family left, no one waiting for her anywhere. Thomas and his poisonous mother had made it clear she had no home to return to. The thought of running away to some unknown town, alone and vulnerable, was terrifying. At least here she had the possibility of honest work and a man who had already demonstrated more decency than anyone else in her life recently. "I would like to stay," she said quietly. "At least for now. I am a good worker, Mr. Miller Austin. I will earn my keep. I have no doubt about that." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "For what it is worth, I am sorry. For what your husband's family did to you. For what you have been through. No one deserves to be treated that way." The kindness in his voice nearly broke her composure, but Catherine blinked back tears and kept her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Thank you for what you did today. You saved me from a fate I do not want to imagine. Any decent person would have done the same." "But they did not," Catherine pointed out. "You did." The ranch appeared in the distance, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley. The main house was larger than Catherine had expected, a two-story structure with a wraparound porch. Nearby stood a barn, a bunkhouse, corrals, and various outbuildings. Cattle grazed across the rolling hills, and she could see several men working near the corrals. As they approached, a man emerged from the barn, tall and lean with dark hair and a weathered face that spoke of years working outdoors. He raised a hand in greeting, his expression curious as he took in Catherine's presence. "Luis Martinez, my foreman," Austin said, pulling the wagon to a stop in front of the house. "Luis, this is Katherine Pierce. She will be working as our housekeeper." Luis's eyes were sharp and assessing, but not unkind. He tipped his hat to Catherine. "Madam, welcome to the Miller Ranch. Though I got to say, boss, you went into town for flour and nails, and you came back with a woman. That is quite a shopping trip." "It is a long story," Austin said, climbing down and moving to help Catherine. "One I will explain later. Right now, I think the lady could use some water and a chance to rest." "Of course." Luis gestured toward the house. "I will let the boys know we finally got ourselves some decent cooking on the way." Catherine managed a small smile as Austin guided her toward the house. The front porch was indeed littered with dust and neglect, confirming his earlier claims about his housekeeping skills. He opened the door and she stepped into chaos. The front room was spacious and well furnished, with comfortable chairs and a large stone fireplace, but every surface was covered in dust, discarded clothing, or stacks of papers. The kitchen beyond was even worse, with dirty dishes piled in the basin and something that might have once been food growing mold on the stove. "I warned you it was bad," Austin said, looking slightly embarrassed. "I am not proud of it." "It is nothing that cannot be fixed with some hard work and hot water," Catherine said, her practical nature asserting itself. Despite the overwhelming events of the day, there was something comforting about having a clear task ahead of her. Cleaning and organizing were problems she knew how to solve. Austin showed her through the house. Downstairs held the main room, kitchen, a dining area, and a small office. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms, though only one appeared to be in use, the rest filled with storage or simply abandoned. He led her to the bedroom farthest from his own. "This was my mother's sewing room before she passed," he said, opening the door to reveal a pleasant space with a window overlooking the valley. The room held a bed, a wardrobe, a small desk, and a rocking chair. Unlike the rest of the house, this room was clean and well maintained. "I have kept it nice over the years, though I am not entirely sure why. I suppose I always thought someone might need it someday." Catherine stepped inside, running her hand over the smooth wood of the desk. Sunlight streamed through the window, warming the space. "It is lovely, thank you." "I will let you rest for a while," Austin said from the doorway. "There is a bathing room just down the hall. The water pump is working. I will have Luis bring up some hot water if you would like to wash up. We eat dinner around sunset, nothing fancy. You are welcome to join us in the dining room, or I can bring something up if you would prefer to be alone." "I will come down," Catherine said, surprising herself. "I should meet the other men if I am going to be working here." Austin nodded. "Just so you know, the only men who come into the main house are Luis, and sometimes my 2 lead ranch hands, Jack and Samuel. Everyone else stays in the bunkhouse or their own cabins. You are safe here, Catherine. I will make sure of it." After he left, closing the door softly behind him, Catherine sank onto the bed and finally allowed herself to process everything that had happened. This morning she had woken in her marital bed, still clinging to the foolish hope that Thomas might stand up for her. By noon she had been bound and put up for auction like an animal. And now, as the afternoon sun began its descent, she found herself in a stranger's home, offered safety and work and dignity when she had expected only cruelty. Austin Miller was a puzzle. He had paid a significant sum of money for her freedom, asked nothing in return except honest work, and treated her with a respect she had not experienced even in her own marriage. It seemed too good to be true, and years of disappointment had taught Catherine to be wary of things that seemed too good. But his eyes had been sincere, and his actions matched his words. For now, that would have to be enough. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Madam, I got hot water for you," came Luis's voice. Catherine opened the door to find the foreman with 2 steaming buckets. He set them down in the bathing room with efficient movements, then paused. "I do not know what brought you here," he said, his accent softening his words. "But Austin is a good man, the best I have ever worked for. Whatever trouble you are running from, you are safe on this ranch." "Thank you," Catherine whispered, moved by the declaration. "That means more than you know." After Luis left, Catherine heated more water and took her time washing away the dust and fear of the day. She had only the clothes she wore, torn and dirty as they were, but she did her best to clean and mend them. When she finally made her way downstairs, as the sun touched the horizon, she found the dining table set for 6, and Austin along with 4 other men gathered around. Austin stood immediately when she entered, and the other men followed his lead, removing their hats. "Catherine, these are the men you will see most often. You have met Luis already. This is Jack Porter, Samuel Reed, and Tom Henderson. Gentlemen, this is Katherine Pierce, and I expect you all to treat her with the utmost respect." The introductions were courteous, the men clearly curious, but respectful. They settled around the table, and Austin brought out a pot of something that might generously be called stew, along with hardtack biscuits that could probably be used as building materials. "This is what I have been surviving on," Austin said with a rueful expression. "So you can see why I am desperate for help." Catherine tasted the stew and barely suppressed a grimace. It was simultaneously burned and undercooked, oversalted and somehow bland. I will start cooking tomorrow, she announced. I cannot in good conscience let this continue. The men laughed, and some of the tension in Catherine's shoulders eased. They spent the meal discussing ranch business, cattle prices, and the upcoming fall roundup. They included Catherine in the conversation naturally, asking about her journey from Sacramento, though they were tactful enough not to pry into painful details. As the evening wore on and the men departed to the bunkhouse, Catherine found herself alone with Austin in the kitchen. She began clearing dishes despite his protests. You have had a terrible day, he said, taking a plate from her hands. You should rest. I need to keep busy, Catherine admitted. If I stop moving, I will start thinking, and if I start thinking, she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Austin was quiet for a moment, then began pumping water into the basin. Then we will work together. You wash, I will dry. They fell into an easy rhythm, the simple domestic task oddly comforting. Catherine found herself stealing glances at her unexpected rescuer, trying to understand him. He had strong, capable hands, and his movements were careful, deliberate. There was a steadiness to him that she found reassuring. Can I ask you something? Catherine said as she handed him a clean plate. Of course. Why did you say you understand what it is like to be powerless? What did you mean? Austin was silent for so long that Catherine thought he would not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. My father was a cruel man. He believed that might made right, and that anyone weaker than him deserved whatever treatment he gave them. My mother suffered under his hand for years before she finally found peace in death. I was 16 when she died, and I swore that day that I would never let anyone be hurt that way if I had the power to stop it. When I saw you in that street today, saw the fear in your eyes and the way those men looked at you, he shook his head. I could not walk away. Catherine's heart ached for the boy he had been, helpless to protect his mother. I am sorry you experienced that. No child should have to witness such things. And no woman should be sold because she cannot bear children, Austin countered. It is barbaric and cruel, and your husband's family should be ashamed of themselves. Thomas was weak, Catherine said softly, speaking the truth she had been avoiding for months. I thought I married a good man, but when his mother turned against me, he crumbled. He let her convince him that I was worthless, that my inability to conceive was some kind of moral failing. Every month when my courses came, I could see the disappointment in his eyes turning to resentment and then to something colder. By the end, he could barely look at me at all. Then he was a fool, Austin said firmly. A woman's worth is not measured in her ability to bear children. It is measured in her character, her kindness, her strength. You survived something today that would have broken many people, and here you are standing in my kitchen washing dishes because you need to feel useful. That takes courage. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes again. You do not have to say such things just to make me feel better. I am not saying them to make you feel better. I am saying them because they are true. Austin set down the dish towel and turned to face her fully. Catherine, I want you to understand something. You are not a charity case to me, and you are not here out of pity. I brought you here because what was happening to you was wrong, and because I genuinely need help running this ranch house. I am paying you for your work because your work has value. If you choose to stay, it is because it is the right choice for you, not because you owe me anything. Are we clear on that? Catherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. In one day, this man had shown her more respect and kindness than her own husband had in 3 years of marriage. It was overwhelming and confusing, and something else she was not ready to name. They finished the dishes in silence, but it was a comfortable quiet now. When everything was clean and put away, Austin lit a lantern and handed it to her. Get some rest, he said gently. Tomorrow we can work out the details of your duties and discuss wages properly. For tonight, just know that you are safe here. Catherine took the lantern and made her way upstairs, pausing at the door to her new room. She looked back to find Austin still standing in the kitchen, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Austin?" she called softly. "Yes? Thank you. For everything." "You are welcome, Catherine. Sleep well." She closed the door and set the lantern on the desk, then sank into the rocking chair and let herself cry for the first time since the ordeal began. She cried for the life she had lost, for the man who had betrayed her, for the children she would never have. But she also cried with relief, with gratitude for unexpected mercy, and with a tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, her life was not over after all. In the morning, Catherine woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of cattle lowing in the distance. For a moment she was disoriented, and then the events of the previous day came flooding back. She rose quickly, braided her hair, and made her way downstairs to find the house empty and the men already out working. She surveyed the kitchen with a critical eye and rolled up her sleeves. If she was going to earn her place here, she would start by making this house livable again. She spent the morning scrubbing surfaces, organizing supplies, and taking inventory of what they had. The pantry was reasonably well stocked with basics, though the selection was limited. She made a mental list of things they would need from town. By noon, she had bread dough rising and a proper stew simmering on the stove, made from salt pork, potatoes, carrots, and herbs she found growing wild near the house. When the men came in for the midday meal, they stopped in the doorway and stared. "Is this the same kitchen?" Jack asked in amazement. "It smells like my mother's house," Samuel added, his voice wistful. Austin appeared behind them, and his eyes widened as he took in the transformation. The surfaces gleamed, the floor was swept, and the table was set with clean plates and actual napkins. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. "Catherine, you did not have to do all this today," he said, but there was unmistakable pleasure in his voice. "Yes, I did," Catherine said, ladling stew into bowls. "I could not stand the state of things another moment. Now sit down and eat while it is hot." The men needed no further encouragement. They dug into the meal with enthusiasm, and Catherine felt a warm satisfaction as she watched their faces light up with each bite. It was good, honest food, nothing fancy, but made with care and skill. "Madam, this is the best meal I have had in 6 months," Louise declared. "Please tell me you are staying permanently." "I am staying as long as I am welcome," Catherine replied, glancing at Austin. "Then you will be here a very long time," he said, meeting her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "This is wonderful, Catherine." "Thank you." The days began to establish a rhythm. Catherine woke early to prepare breakfast for the men, then spent her mornings cleaning and organizing different parts of the house. Afternoons were devoted to baking, mending clothes, and preparing dinner. It was hard work, but it was satisfying in a way her life with Thomas had never been. Here, her efforts were appreciated and valued. Austin proved to be an easy man to work for. He was considerate without being overbearing, always asking rather than demanding, and treating Catherine like a respected colleague rather than a servant. They fell into the habit of sitting together after dinner, talking about the day's events while Catherine mended or sewed. It was during one of these evenings, about 2 weeks after her arrival, that Austin brought up the topic she had been dreading. "I need to go into Ukiah tomorrow for supplies," he said, studying her face carefully. "I thought you might want to come along. Pick out some things for yourself. Fabric for new dresses, perhaps, or anything else you need. I know you only have the one outfit." Catherine's hands stilled on the shirt she was mending. The thought of returning to town, where she might see Edmund or the men who had bid on her, made her stomach clench with anxiety. Austin seemed to read her hesitation. "I understand if you are not ready. I can bring back fabric, and you can tell me what else you need." "No," Catherine said, forcing steel into her voice. "I cannot hide here forever. And you are right, I need more than one dress. I will come with you." The next morning they set out early in the wagon, the sun barely above the horizon. The ride was pleasant, and Catherine found herself relaxing as Austin pointed out various landmarks and told her stories about the valley's history. He had grown up on this land, he explained. His father had claimed it in the early days, built the ranch through sheer stubbornness and cruelty. When Austin inherited it at 18 after his father's death, he had worked to transform it into something different, something better. I wanted to build something that honored my mother's memory, he said. A place where people were treated fairly, where hard work was rewarded, where no one had to live in fear. It has taken 12 years, but I think we are getting there. You are 30? Catherine asked, realizing she had never thought to inquire about his age. Last month, you said you are 22? Yes, I feel much older after everything that has happened. Hardship has a way of doing that. Austin guided the horses around a particularly rough patch of road. But you are stronger than you think, Catherine. I see it every day in how you have adapted to life on the ranch, how you have taken control of your situation rather than letting it defeat you. Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. I had a good teacher in resilience, watching my parents rebuild after every setback. They lost everything in a flood when I was young, and they simply started over. I try to remember their example. When they reached Ukiah, Catherine kept her head high despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. Austin stayed close to her side as they visited the general store, and his solid presence gave her courage. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Chen, was a kind woman who showed Catherine bolts of fabric in various colors and patterns. This would bring out your eyes, Mrs. Chen said, holding up a deep blue calico. And this cream muslin would be good for undergarments and night dresses. Catherine selected several yards of fabric along with thread, needles, and other necessities. Austin added items to the order without asking prices, clearly unconcerned about the cost. When Catherine protested, he simply said, "You need clothes to work, and I am paying you wages regardless. Let me do this." As they were loading the wagon, a woman's voice called out, "Austin Miller, I heard you got yourself married." They turned to see a well-dressed woman in her 40s approaching, her expression friendly and curious. Austin's posture relaxed slightly. "Hello, Margaret. Catherine, this is Margaret Thompson. She runs the boarding house and knows everyone's business within an hour of it happening. Margaret, this is Katherine Pierce." "Oh, using her maiden name still?" Margaret said with interest. "How modern of you. Welcome to Ukiah, dear. I must say, the town gossip mill has been working overtime since your arrival. Is it true that Austin bid $100 for you in an impromptu auction?" Catherine felt her face heat, but Austin answered smoothly. "What is true is that I encountered Catherine in unfortunate circumstances and offered her employment and protection. The details beyond that are our private business." Of course," Margaret said, though her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Well, my dear, if you ever need anything or simply want some female company, my door is always open. We women have to look out for each other out here." Despite the nosiness, there was genuine warmth in Margaret's invitation, and Catherine found herself smiling. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I may take you up on that offer someday." As they drove out of town, Catherine noticed Austin seemed more relaxed, even pleased. "She is the town gossip?" Catherine asked. "Yes, but she has a good heart. And if Margaret likes you, the rest of the town will follow her lead. That went better than I hoped." "You were worried about how people would perceive me." "I was worried about how they would treat you," Austin corrected. "There is a difference. I do not care what people think of me, but I do not want you to suffer more gossip and cruelty because of the circumstances that brought you here." Catherine studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands held the reins with easy competence. She was beginning to realize that Austin Miller was unlike any man she had ever known. He thought of others before himself, protected those weaker than him, and treated everyone with dignity regardless of their station. Her husband had been handsome and charming, but his character had crumbled under pressure. Austin's character seemed to be forged from something much stronger. That night, after dinner, Catherine began cutting fabric for her new dresses. Austin sat nearby, ostensibly reading a book about cattle breeding, but she noticed him watching her work with interest. I have been thinking, he said suddenly, about your wages. I never actually discussed specifics with you, which was poorly done of me. You are feeding me and housing me, Catherine pointed out. That alone is worth a great deal. Nevertheless, you deserve proper compensation. I was thinking $20 a month in addition to room and board. Does that seem fair? Catherine's needle slipped, and she pricked her finger. $20 a month was more than generous, more than most housekeepers earned even in wealthy households. Austin, that is too much. It is what I paid Mrs. Henderson, and you work twice as hard as she did. You have transformed this house in 2 weeks, Catherine. The men are happier. I am eating actual food instead of charred mystery meat, and I no longer feel ashamed to have visitors. You have earned every penny. Then yes, that is more than fair. Thank you. They fell silent again, but Catherine's mind was racing. In 6 months, she could save over $100. That was enough to start a new life anywhere she wanted, enough for independence and security. The thought should have excited her, but instead, she felt an unexpected reluctance. The ranch was beginning to feel like home in a way her marriage never had. The weeks turned into months as summer faded toward autumn. Catherine's skin took on a healthy glow from the California sunshine, and the shadows under her eyes gradually disappeared. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, how the work changed with the seasons, which cattle were whose favorites. She became friends with Luis's wife, Rosa, who lived in one of the cabins with their 3 children and sometimes rode into town with Margaret Thompson for socializing and shopping. Her relationship with Austin evolved in subtle ways. They still talked every evening, but the conversations grew deeper, more personal. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, his plans to improve the breeding stock and expand into horse training. She told him about her years teaching, the joy she had found in watching children learn to read, and how much she missed it. Why did you stop teaching when you married? Austin asked one evening in late September. Thomas's mother insisted it was inappropriate for a married woman to work outside the home. She said my duty was to provide my husband with heirs and maintain his household. Catherine's voice was bitter. I obeyed because I thought that was what a good wife did. I gave up the thing that gave me purpose. And for what? A husband who abandoned me the moment I failed to meet his expectations. His expectations were unreasonable and cruel, Austin said fiercely. Catherine, you know that what happened is not your fault, right? There is nothing wrong with you. I know that in my head, Catherine said softly. But my heart still carries the weight of being called barren and worthless. Those words do not disappear just because I know they are untrue. Austin was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was careful. Can I ask you something personal? You do not have to answer if you do not want to. Go ahead. Do you grieve for the children you believe you will never have? Or do you grieve more for how your inability to conceive was used as a weapon against you? Catherine set down her sewing and considered the question seriously. Both, I suppose. I always imagined myself as a mother, teaching my children to read, watching them grow. But more than that, I grieve what it cost me. My marriage, my security, my sense of worth. If I could conceive tomorrow, it would not erase what happened or change what was revealed about Thomas's character. The true grief is realizing that I was only valued for what I could provide, not for who I am. Then Thomas was not only weak, he was blind, Austin said. Because who you are is extraordinary, Catherine. You are strong and kind and resilient. You are skilled at everything you put your hand to. You make this house feel like a home, and not just because you cook and clean. You bring warmth and life to everything around you. Any man would be lucky to have you in his life, children or not. Catherine's heart hammered in her chest. The way Austin looked at her had changed over the weeks, becoming softer, more intense. And if she was honest with herself, the way she looked at him had changed too. She found herself watching for his return each evening, listening for his voice, savoring the time they spent together. She noticed small things about him, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how his hair curled at his collar when it needed cutting, the sound of his laugh. It was dangerous, these growing feelings. She had only been free of her marriage for a few months. The wounds were still fresh, the betrayal still raw. And yet Austin was nothing like Thomas. Where Thomas had been charming but shallow, Austin was quietly honorable. Where Thomas had crumbled under his mother's influence, Austin stood firm in his convictions. Where Thomas had measured her worth by her womb, Austin valued her for her mind and her character. "Thank you," Katherine whispered. "That means more than you know." The autumn roundup came in October, and the ranch buzzed with activity as they gathered cattle from the far pastures and prepared calves for market. Katherine found herself cooking for twice as many men as usual, as Austin hired extra hands for the intensive work. She rose before dawn to prepare enormous breakfasts, packed lunches for the men working distant ranges, and made hearty dinners that disappeared in minutes. One evening, Austin returned to the house well after dark, exhausted and covered in dust. Katherine had kept dinner warm for him, and she heated water while he ate. "You should be in bed," he protested when she carried the heavy kettle upstairs to the bathing room. "You have been working since before sunrise." "So have you," Katherine pointed out, "and you need to wash off about 3 layers of dirt before you can sleep. Consider this part of my duties." After she left him to bathe, Katherine found herself lingering in the hallway, her heart racing at the thought of him just beyond the door. She pressed her palm against the wall and closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. When had her gratitude transformed into something deeper? When had the thought of leaving this ranch become unbearable? The roundup concluded successfully, with cattle sold for good prices and the herd healthy going into winter. Austin paid out bonuses to all the hands, and Katherine found her own wages deposited into an account he had opened for her at the Ukiah Bank. She now had nearly $150 saved, a fortune to someone who had arrived with nothing. "You could leave," Austin said one evening in late November. They were sitting by the fire, the first cold snap of winter making the warmth welcome. "You have enough money to start fresh anywhere you want. I would help you, give you references, whatever you need." Katherine looked up from the scarf she was knitting, surprised. "Do you want me to leave?" "No," Austin said immediately, then seemed to catch himself. "That is, you are welcome to stay as long as you want. I just wanted you to know that you have options now. You are not trapped here." "I never felt trapped," Katherine said quietly. "This is the first place I have felt free in years." Something flickered in Austin's eyes, an emotion too quick to name. "I am glad. I just want you to be happy, Katherine, whatever that looks like for you." Winter settled over the valley, bringing cold rains and occasional frost. The pace of ranch work slowed, and Austin spent more time working on paperwork and planning in his office. Katherine found herself drawn to keep him company, bringing coffee or tea and sitting to read while he worked. Sometimes they would talk for hours about everything and nothing, philosophy and politics, dreams and disappointments. It was during one of these afternoons in December that Luis knocked on the office door, his expression troubled. "Boss, we got a problem. That mare Lightning, she is down with colic and it looks bad. We might lose her." Austin was on his feet immediately, grabbing his coat. "Get the veterinary supplies and meet me at the barn. Katherine, I may be up all night with this." "I will keep food and coffee ready," she assured him, already planning what she could prepare. She did not see Austin again until the following afternoon, when he stumbled into the kitchen, hollow-eyed but relieved. "We saved her. It was close, but she pulled through." "Go to bed," Katherine ordered, pushing him toward the stairs. "I will bring up something light to eat, and then you are sleeping for at least 6 hours." Austin was too tired to argue. Katherine brought him broth and bread, waiting while he ate to take away the dishes. As she turned to leave, his hand caught hers. "Thank you," he said, his eyes already half closed, "for being here, for caring." Always, Catherine whispered, squeezing his hand gently before slipping away. Christmas approached, and Catherine threw herself into preparations. She baked cookies and pies, decorated the house with pine boughs and holly, and even managed to find small gifts for all the men. For Austin, she had sewn a new shirt from fabric she had bought with her own money, embroidering his initials carefully on the cuff. On Christmas Eve, Austin announced he was giving all the hands the next 2 days off with pay. The bunkhouse would host a party that evening, and Catherine was invited to join. She dressed in her best dress, the deep blue calico that Mrs. Chin had recommended, and pinned her hair up carefully. When she came downstairs, Austin was waiting in the front room, and he stopped mid-sentence in his conversation with Louise to stare. "Catherine, you look beautiful." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself." He did. He wore dark trousers and a crisp white shirt, his hair neatly combed, his face freshly shaven. He looked like what he was, a prosperous rancher, but also something more. He looked like a man who might be courting her, if such a thing were possible. The party was lively, with music from Luis's guitar and singing from the men. Rosa had made tamales, and there was pie and cake and cookies aplenty. Catherine found herself laughing more than she had in years, dancing with Jack and Samuel and even Luis, who was surprisingly graceful. But it was when Austin asked her to dance that everything changed. He led her outside where the air was crisp and cold, and the music filtered through the bunkhouse windows. Under a sky full of stars, he placed one hand on her waist and took her hand with the other, and they moved to the slow melody. "I have something to tell you," Austin said quietly, his breath misting in the cold air. "And I know the timing might be terrible, but I cannot keep it to myself any longer." Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. "What is it?" "I am falling in love with you," Austin said simply. "Maybe I have been since the moment I saw you in that street, standing tall despite everything they were doing to you. Or maybe it has grown slowly in all the small moments we have shared. But somewhere along the way, Catherine, you became the most important person in my world." Catherine could barely breathe. "Austin, Let me finish," he said gently. "I know you have been through hell. I know you were sold by your husband's family because you cannot conceive, and I know that has wounded you in ways I can barely imagine. But I need you to understand something. I want you, Catherine. Not as a housekeeper, not as a convenience. I want you as my partner, my companion, my wife if you will have me. And I want you whether you can give me children or not. I am not my father. I do not measure a woman's worth by her womb or value family only in terms of bloodline and heirs. I want you exactly as you are for the rest of my life." Tears streamed down Catherine's face. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I have tried not to, tried to tell myself it is too soon, that I am not ready. But every day I wake up grateful to be here, grateful to see you, grateful for every moment we spend together. You make me feel valued in a way I have never experienced. You make me feel whole." Austin cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "Then let me court you properly. Let me show you what love should look like, what partnership can be. We will take it as slowly as you need. I am not going anywhere, Catherine. I am yours for as long as you want me." "Kiss me," Catherine breathed. "Please." Austin lowered his head slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind. When his lips finally met hers, it was gentle and tender and perfect. Catherine melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her heart soaring. This was nothing like the perfunctory kisses Thomas had given her. This was passion tempered with respect, desire coupled with devotion. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Austin rested his forehead against hers. "Merry Christmas, Catherine." "Merry Christmas, Austin." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other under the stars, and Catherine felt something she had thought lost forever. Hope for the future. The courtship that followed was everything Katherine had never known she wanted. Austin brought her wildflowers, even in winter when they were hard to find. He took her on rides across the ranch, showing her his favorite places, the hidden valleys and clear streams. He asked her opinion on ranch decisions and listened carefully to her suggestions. He made her laugh with stories from his youth and held her when she cried about the past. But more than any grand gesture, it was the small moments that won Catherine's heart completely. The way Austin always made sure she had the comfortable chair by the fire. How he learned to make coffee just the way she liked it so he could surprise her in the mornings. The way he looked at her across the dinner table as if she were the only person in the world. In January, Austin asked Katherine to marry him properly, presenting her with a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. "I know you have been married before," he said, kneeling in the front room where they spent their evenings. "And I know that marriage brought you pain, but I am asking you to take a chance on me, on us. Marry me, Katherine. Be my partner in all things, my love for all time. Let me spend the rest of my life showing you what you truly deserve." "Yes," Katherine said through happy tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in February in a simple ceremony at the small church in Ukiah, with Luis and Rosa standing as witnesses and Margaret Thompson weeping happily in the front pew. Katherine wore a dress of cream silk that she had sewn herself, and Austin could not take his eyes off her through the entire service. That night, as they lay together in Austin's bed, which was now their bed, Katherine finally allowed herself to believe in happiness again. Austin made love to her with a tenderness and passion that erased every bad memory, every moment of inadequacy her first marriage had left behind. "I love you," he whispered against her hair as she drifted toward sleep in his arms. "Every part of you exactly as you are." "I love you too," Katherine murmured. "Thank you for seeing me when I thought I was invisible. Thank you for wanting me when I believed I was unwanted." "Always," Austin promised. "For the rest of our lives, I will want you. Children or not, that will never change." Spring came to the valley in an explosion of wildflowers and new grass. The ranch hummed with activity as calves were born and the cycle of life continued. Katherine found joy in her new role as Austin's wife, as partner in the ranch rather than just employee. Her suggestions for improving the kitchen garden and raising chickens were implemented, and she took pride in seeing her ideas bear fruit. In April, Luis and Rosa invited them to dinner to celebrate the christening of their newest baby. Katherine held the tiny infant with a mixture of joy and sorrow, acutely aware that she would likely never hold a child of her own. Austin seemed to sense her melancholy on the ride home. "What are you thinking about?" he asked gently. "That baby was beautiful," Katherine said, "and I am happy for Luis and Rosa. But I cannot help wondering what it would be like to hold my own child, to see your eyes looking back at me from a tiny face." Austin pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her. "Katherine, I meant what I said. I want you, not children. But if having children in our lives is important to you, there are other ways. We could provide a home for a child who needs one, through adoption or fostering. There are always orphans in need of families, especially out here where disease and accidents leave children alone too often." Catherine's heart swelled. "You would do that? Raise another man's child as your own?" "I would raise any child you brought into our home as my own," Austin said firmly. "Blood does not make family, Katherine. Love does. If you want children in our lives, we will find a way to make that happen. But only if it is what you want, not because you think you owe it to me or anyone else." Katherine threw her arms around him, overwhelmed with love for this extraordinary man. "I do not know what I did to deserve you, Austin Miller." "You survived," Austin said simply. "You endured hell and came through it with your heart still intact, still capable of love and trust. You are the strongest person I know, Katherine. I am the lucky one." In June, a telegram arrived from Sacramento that shattered the peace of their lives. Thomas had died of pneumonia, and his mother, Martha, was demanding that Katherine return to claim her widow's portion of the estate and fulfill her duties as the deceased's wife. Katherine stood in the office, staring at the telegram with shaking hands. Austin read over her shoulder, and she felt his body tense with anger. "She has no right," he said flatly. "You are married to me now. You owe that woman nothing." "Legally, I do not know what my position is," Katherine said, her voice unsteady. "Thomas and I never formally divorced. I was sold, but that sale had no legal standing. Am I still technically his widow? Could Martha make a claim on me or demand I return?" Austin pulled her into his arms. "We will write to a lawyer and sort this out properly. But Katherine, hear me clearly. You are my wife. You are not going back to those people, not for any reason. I will fight anyone who tries to take you from me, including the courts if necessary." They consulted with a lawyer in Ukiah who confirmed that Katherine's marriage to Thomas had effectively ended when his family sold her. As abandonment and trafficking constituted grounds for divorce in California, the lawyer drafted documents formalizing the dissolution of that marriage and establishing Katherine's legal marriage to Austin. He also sent a strongly worded letter to Martha Pierce, informing her that Katherine owed her nothing and would not be returning to Sacramento under any circumstances. Martha's reply was venomous, filled with accusations and threats, but the threats were empty, and eventually the letters stopped coming. Katherine burned the last one in the fireplace and felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "It is truly over," she said wonderingly. "That part of my life is finished." "And this part is just beginning," Austin said, kissing her temple. "Our life together, whatever shape it takes." In August, Margaret Thompson approached Katherine after church with an unusual request. A family had been killed in a wagon accident outside town, leaving behind 3 orphaned children, a boy of 8, a girl of 6, and a baby boy not yet a year old. The town was trying to find placements for them, but no one wanted to take all 3 together. "I thought of you and Austin immediately," Margaret said. "I know you have spoken about wanting children, and these little ones desperately need a home. Would you at least consider it?" Katherine's heart raced as she looked at Austin, who had been listening quietly. He met her eyes, and she saw the answer there before he spoke. "We would like to meet them," Austin said. "If they need a family, we can provide that." The children were staying temporarily at the boarding house, cared for by Margaret and her staff. When Katherine and Austin arrived, they found 3 small, frightened souls who had lost everything. The oldest, Nate, was trying to be brave, but his eyes were red-rimmed from crying. The little girl, Emma, clung to her brother and would not speak. The baby David was fussy and uncomfortable in the arms of a stranger. Katherine's maternal instincts roared to life. She knelt down to Nate's level and spoke gently. "Hello, Nate. My name is Katherine, and this is my husband, Austin. We heard you and your brother and sister need a place to stay." "We stay together," Nate said fiercely, his chin jutting out. "Emma and David do not go anywhere without me." "Of course you stay together," Austin said, crouching down as well. "We would not dream of separating you. We have a big house on a ranch with plenty of room for all 3 of you. We have horses and cattle, and room to run and play. If you want to come stay with us, you are all welcome." Emma peeked out from behind her brother. "Do you have a dog?" she asked in a tiny voice. Katherine smiled. "No, but we could get one if you wanted. Every child should have a dog." Over the following weeks, the children came to live at the Miller Ranch. It was not an easy transition. Nate was angry and grieving, lashing out at any attempt to comfort him. Emma had nightmares and would wake screaming for her mother. David cried for hours, inconsolable in his confusion and fear. But Katherine and Austin were patient and loving, giving the children space to grieve while providing constant reassurance that they were safe and wanted. Katherine held David for hours, walking the floors at night when he would not settle. Austin taught Nate to ride and rope, giving the boy an outlet for his anger and energy. Emma slowly emerged from her shell as Katherine read to her every night and let her help in the garden. By the time autumn arrived again, marking a full year since Catherine had come to the ranch, the children had become part of the family. Nate called Austin Sir, but looked at him with something like hero worship. Emma had declared Catherine her new mama with a child's straightforward acceptance. And David, who had never known parents other than Catherine and Austin, reached for them with complete trust. One evening, as Catherine tucked Emma into bed and kissed her good night, the little girl wrapped her arms around Catherine's neck and whispered, "I am glad you are my mama now. You are the best mama in the whole world." Catherine had to leave the room quickly before Emma saw her tears. She found Austin in the hallway, and he pulled her into his arms without a word, understanding everything she could not say. "Thank you," Catherine whispered against his chest. "Thank you for giving me this, for understanding what I needed even when I did not know how to ask for it." "We are a family now," Austin said. "All five of us. This is what I wanted all along, Catherine. Not children of my blood, but children of our hearts. This is everything." Christmas that year was joyous and chaotic, with children's laughter filling the house and homemade decorations covering every surface. Catherine watched Austin teaching Nate to carve wooden animals and saw the boy's face light up with pride at his creation. She listened to Emma's excited chatter about the doll Catherine had sewn for her. She held David as he reached for the shiny ornaments on the tree, his fat baby hands grasping at the light. This was what family looked like, Catherine realized. Not bloodlines or duty or obligation, but love freely given and received. Austin had been right all along. It was not about conceiving children. It was about creating a home where love could grow. In the spring of 1878, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She stared at the signs in disbelief for weeks before mentioning it to Rosa, who confirmed what Catherine barely dared to hope. Her courses had stopped, her breasts were tender, and she was nauseous in the mornings. All the signs she had longed for during her first marriage and never experienced were suddenly present. "But I was told I could not conceive," Catherine said, bewildered. "The doctors said it was unlikely I ever would." Rosa smiled wisely. "Sometimes when we stop striving and simply live, our bodies surprise us. You are happy here, Catherine. You are loved and secure. Perhaps that made all the difference." Catherine sat with the knowledge for several days, trying to process the complicated emotions it stirred up. She was overjoyed at the possibility of carrying Austin's child, of giving birth to a baby created from their love. But she was also terrified that the old pattern would repeat, that she would lose this pregnancy as perhaps she had lost others too early to know about during her first marriage. When she finally told Austin, he was working in the barn, mending tack. She approached quietly, her heart in her throat. "Austin, can I talk to you for a moment?" He looked up immediately, his expression concerned. "Of course, what is wrong? You look pale." "I am pregnant," Catherine blurted out, and then covered her mouth with her hand as if she could take the words back. Austin dropped the leather strap he had been holding. "You are, Catherine. Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor's confirmation. All the signs are there. I know it seems impossible after everything." But Austin crossed the space between them in 3 strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her startled laugh. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with tears. "This is wonderful," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Catherine, this is a miracle." "You are not disappointed?" Catherine asked, searching his face. "You said you did not need children. You said you wanted me regardless." "And I meant every word of that," Austin said fiercely. "If you had never conceived, I would have been perfectly content with our life. But the fact that we are being given this gift, a child created from our love, how could I be anything but thrilled? I love you, Catherine, and I will love this baby. But my love for you has never been conditional on children, born or unborn." Catherine kissed him then, pouring all her relief and joy and love into the embrace. "I am terrified," she admitted. "What if something goes wrong?" What if I lose this baby like I must have lost others before? Then we will grieve together and support each other, Austin said simply. But we will not borrow trouble from tomorrow. For today, we celebrate this blessing and take care of you and our baby as best we can. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer. Catherine bloomed with health, her face glowing and her body rounding gently with new life. The children were excited about the prospect of a new baby sibling, with Emma especially determined to be a helpful big sister. In October, Catherine went into labor on a crisp autumn morning. Rosa attended her along with the doctor from town, while Austin paced the house downstairs, driven nearly mad with worry. Louise kept him company, sharing whiskey and stories to distract him from the sounds coming from upstairs. After 12 hours of labor, Catherine gave birth to a healthy baby boy with his father's hazel eyes and his mother's dark hair. Austin burst into the room the moment Rosa called for him, and the sight of Catherine sitting up in bed, tired but radiant, holding their son, made him fall to his knees beside her. "He is perfect," Austin whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "Catherine, he is absolutely perfect, and you are incredible." "We are naming him James," Catherine said softly, "after your mother's father, if that is all right with you." "It is more than all right." Austin kissed Catherine's forehead, then his son's. "Thank you for this, for everything, for being in my life. You have given me more than I ever dreamed possible." The children came in to meet their new brother, with Nate being very gentle and Emma cooing over how tiny he was. David, now a toddler, was less interested in the baby and more concerned about when Catherine would be up to make cookies again, which made everyone laugh. Life settled into a new rhythm with the baby. Catherine had help from Rosa and from Emma, who took her role as big sister very seriously. Austin proved to be a devoted father, walking the floors at night with James when Catherine was exhausted, changing diapers without complaint, and staring at his son with such obvious wonder that it made Catherine's heart overflow. One evening in December, as they sat together by the fire with James sleeping in a cradle nearby and the other children tucked into bed upstairs, Austin pulled Catherine close. "Do you remember 2 years ago when I found you in Ukiah?" he asked quietly. "I remember everything about that day," Catherine said. "The fear, the humiliation, the despair. And then you appeared like something out of a dream, offering me hope when I thought there was none left." "I thought I was rescuing you," Austin admitted. "I thought I was being noble, saving a woman from a terrible fate. But the truth is, you rescued me, Catherine. You took this empty house and made it a home. You took my lonely life and filled it with love and laughter. You gave me a family, not through obligation or duty, but through choice. Every day I wake up grateful that fate brought you into my life." Catherine turned to look at him, this man who had seen her at her lowest point and loved her anyway. "I used to think I was broken because I could not give Thomas children. I thought that was my only value, my only purpose. But you showed me I was wrong. You loved me when I had nothing to offer but myself, and that taught me that I was enough, exactly as I was. You gave me back my sense of worth, Austin. You gave me back my life. And you have made that life worth living," Austin said, kissing her softly. "I love you, Catherine Miller. I will love you until my last breath, whether we have one child or 10 or none at all. You are my heart, my partner, my everything." "I love you too," Catherine whispered. "Thank you for wanting me, not children. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for being the man you are." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire and listening to their baby's soft breathing. Outside, the ranch was quiet under a blanket of stars. The cattle settled for the night, the horses dozing in their stalls. It was peaceful and perfect, and Catherine felt a contentment so deep it brought tears to her eyes. 2 years ago, she had stood in a dusty street, being sold like property, certain her life was over. Now she sat in her own home, surrounded by love, with a husband who valued her for exactly who she was, and children who filled her days with purpose and joy. The journey from that terrible day to this moment of peace had been painful and difficult, but it had brought her here, to this life, to this man, to this family. And it had all started because a cowboy had looked at her with kind eyes and said he wanted her, not children. Those words had changed everything, had given her the courage to believe in love again, had shown her that her worth was inherent, not conditional. As James stirred in his cradle and began to fuss, Catherine rose to tend to him, lifting her son into her arms and settling back beside Austin. He wrapped his arm around both of them, and Catherine leaned into his solid warmth, feeling cherished and safe. This was her life now. This was her family, and it was more than she had ever dared to dream possible. The years that followed were filled with the everyday joys and challenges of ranching and raising children. Nate grew into a fine young man who took naturally to ranch work and eventually became Austin's right-hand man. Emma developed a talent for working with horses and began training them with a skill that rivaled her adoptive father's. David, ever the charmer, was clever with numbers and began helping with the ranch accounts as soon as he could write. James grew into a sturdy boy with his father's quiet strength and his mother's compassionate heart. And in 1880, Catherine gave birth to twin girls, Sarah and Rebecca, who filled the house with even more laughter and chaos. The ranch prospered under Austin and Catherine's partnership. They expanded the horse breeding program, added a dairy operation, and became known throughout California for the quality of their livestock and the fairness of their business practices. Catherine managed the household and finances with skill, while also establishing a small school on the property for their own children and those of the ranch workers. Margaret Thompson became a frequent visitor and beloved honorary aunt to all the children. Luis and Rosa's family grew as well, and the two families became deeply intertwined, celebrating holidays and milestones together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Austin took Catherine on a trip to San Francisco, their first time away from the ranch together. As they stood on the deck of a steamship watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, Austin took her hand. "Have I told you lately that you are the best thing that ever happened to me?" he asked with a smile. "Only about 100 times this week," Catherine teased, leaning against his shoulder. "But I never get tired of hearing it." "Good, because I plan to keep saying it for the next 50 years. Austin pulled her close, and Catherine felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt on that snowy Christmas Eve when he first kissed her. The passion between them had never faded. If anything, it had deepened with time and shared experiences. "I have something to tell you," Catherine said, smiling up at him with sparkling eyes. "You are pregnant again," Austin guessed immediately, and Catherine laughed. "How did you know?" "You get this particular glow," Austin said, touching her cheek tenderly. "And you have been craving pickles with everything for the past week. How do you feel about it?" "Happy," Catherine said simply. "Overwhelmed sometimes by how blessed we are, but happy. Is that all right?" "More than all right." Austin kissed her forehead. "Every child is a gift, Catherine, but so are you. Never forget that you were everything I wanted before we had any children, and you would still be everything I wanted if we never had another. You are not valuable because of your womb. You are valuable because you are you." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Even after 10 years, Austin still knew exactly what she needed to hear, still understood the old wounds that sometimes ached. "I love you so much. I love you too. Now and always." They returned home to a joyous reunion with their children, who had missed them terribly, despite being well cared for by Rosa and Luis. That night, as Catherine tucked each child into bed and listened to their stories of the week's adventures, she marveled at the richness of her life. She thought back to that terrified woman in Ukiah's dusty street, certain her life had no value because she could not conceive. If she could speak to that younger self, she would tell her that the best parts of life were still ahead. that she would find a love deeper and truer than anything she had imagined, that she would become a mother in ways she never expected, both through adoption and through birth, that she would build a life of purpose and meaning that had nothing to do with her ability to bear children and everything to do with her strength, compassion, and resilience. Most importantly, she would tell her younger self that she was enough. She had always been enough, and she always would be. Austin found her standing in the hallway between the children's rooms, a soft smile on her face. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. "How grateful I am," Katherine said, leaning back against him. "For everything. For you. For this life we have built together." "We have built it well," Austin agreed, resting his chin on top of her head. "And we are not finished yet. There are still so many years ahead of us, so many adventures to share." They stood there together in the quiet house, listening to the gentle sounds of their children sleeping and the distant lowing of cattle settling for the night. The ranch was at peace, and so were they. Katherine turned in Austin's arms and looked up at the man who had changed her entire world. "Take me to bed, husband," she said softly. "I want to fall asleep in your arms." "Always," Austin promised, echoing the word he had spoken on their wedding night and countless times since. "For the rest of our lives, I will hold you close. You are my heart, Katherine Miller. You always will be." And as they made their way to the bedroom they had shared for 10 years, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. She had been sold because she could not conceive, discarded as worthless by a man too weak to see her value. But she had been found by a man who wanted her for exactly who she was, who loved her completely and unconditionally, who had given her a family and a home and a purpose beyond anything she had imagined. The cowboy had said he wanted her, not children, and in doing so, he had given her everything. The story of Katherine and Austin Miller became something of a legend in Ukiah and the surrounding valleys. People spoke of the woman who had been sold in the street and the cowboy who had rescued her, of how their love had grown into something remarkable, and of the family they had built together through love rather than blood alone. But for Katherine and Austin, it was not a legend. It was simply their life, filled with ordinary moments of joy and struggle, laughter and tears, triumph and disappointment. They grew old together on their ranch, watching their children grow and have families of their own, welcoming grandchildren and great-grandchildren into a home that was always filled with love. And through it all, Austin never stopped reminding Katherine that she was valuable for who she was, not for what she could produce. Even in their final years, when they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the valley they had made their own, he would take her hand and say, "I wanted you, not children, and I got everything I ever dreamed of and more." Katherine would smile, squeeze his hand, and reply, "So did I, my love. So did I." Their love story was not about grand gestures or dramatic rescues, though it had begun that way. It was about two broken people who had found healing in each other, about choosing love every day despite the wounds of the past, about building a family and a life that honored both of them completely. It was about a woman who learned she was enough, exactly as she was, and it was about a man who had always known that truth and spent his life making sure she knew it too. When Austin passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, Katherine held his hand and whispered her gratitude for every moment they had shared. She followed him 6 months later, unable to bear being apart from the man who had been her partner, her love, her everything for more than 50 years. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a spreading oak tree. Their children and grandchildren gathered to say goodbye, and as the sun set over the valley, someone began to tell the story of how Katherine and Austin had met. It was a story that would be told for generations, of the woman who was sold because she could not conceive, and the cowboy who said he wanted her, not children, of how that simple declaration of love had changed both their lives forever. And it was a story that ended not with sadness, but with celebration of a love that had endured, a family that had flourished, and two souls who had found in each other exactly what they needed. It was, in every way, a story of love triumphant,